It was covered in gold, which was representative of deity, of God. So he was man, yet God. Some time ago, with a scripture we read with our family devotions, and the question was, it mentioned something about walking worthy of the calling that we're called to. And someone asked, and was like, well, I thought none of us are worthy. And I think it kind of depends which name we're living under. Are we living under the name and the practice of what our accuser would have us live in, or in that place? Yeah, we are not worthy. We can't do anything. But if we are called by a new name because of repentance, forgiveness, we can walk worthy of that name. We can live and walk in that. I just thought I appreciated the devotional and wanted to express that. This evening I wanted to, I believe it's a conclusion of the series. I was looking at the tabernacle of the Old Testament, of the wilderness, and some of the different aspects and parts of that. The tabernacle was a place of worship where a holy God dwelt among man. In Exodus 25:8 it said, "Let them make me a sanctuary that I may dwell among them." The purpose that God had to make the tabernacle was that there would be a place where his presence could dwell among them and have relationship with people. I was thinking of patterns. Patterns or types. People often will talk about it, types and shadows, things that are pointing to something else, almost like a reflection, a dim reflection of something greater. And in Hebrews 8 verse 5 it says that the things of that tabernacle and the priests that served there, says they served unto the example and shadow of heavenly things. As Moses was admonished by God when he was about to make the tabernacle, "For see, saith he, that thou make all the things according to the pattern shown to thee in the mount." So the tabernacle, the way he built it, was built off of a pattern, which meant he had a picture given him by God in the mountain of what he was building the tabernacle to look like. Have you ever heard of the word type and antitype? So it doesn't mean against a type, antitype, but antetype. Antitype means a type is like a picture of something. The antitype or antitype is the thing that it's modeled after. One said the antitype refers to an example or model that sets a standard against which all other things are evaluated. It often represents the original form or concept from which variations and derivatives are derived. So when we think of this tabernacle that they made in the wilderness, it was not the antitype. It wasn't the standard. It wasn't the original form. That was something in the heavenlies. That was a picture that Moses seen on the mount, and they built this after. So when we see the types of the Old Testament, and we talk about them being types or pictures of the tabernacle, the parts of it, the functions there, those were all not an end in themselves. They were pointing to something else. And I was blessed in this scripture I read this week, right close to the very end of the Bible. Revelation 21:22 says, talking about the New Jerusalem, that city that comes down from God, that place where God is with man. It says, "I saw no temple therein," in that New Jerusalem. "I saw no temple therein, for the Lord God Almighty and the Lamb are the temple of it." And I was just thinking about that in relation to the tabernacle and temple of the Old Testament times. There's no temple like that exactly, because God and the Lamb are the temple. And I believe that that's what all those parts and pieces and pictures and types were pointing to, was to God and to the Lamb, to Jesus Christ. All parts and pieces of the tabernacle of the wilderness point to Christ. In the book of Hebrews, we see that he came fulfilling all that the tabernacle and the covenant of the Old Testament represented. This evening, over different messages over last couple of years, I've kind of worked through doing a study of some of the different parts and the furnishings or the furniture of the ark or the tabernacle. And we looked at the outer court and the courtyard. We looked at the brazen altar, the laver where they were washed. They came into the tabernacle structure itself where there was two parts to it, a holy place and the holiest of all. And in the holy place there was a table of showbread, there was the candlestick and an altar of incense. And then there was the curtain dividing between that place, which was a holy place that only the priests were allowed to go, and the holiest of all, which the high priest could only go once a year. And in that holiest of all, there was something else. And that is the Ark of the Covenant is one term labeled there. I'm not going to write as I speak, so I'm going to just set this up here. I don't know if you can all see that. Hopefully you can. The Ark of the Covenant, and just kind of an outline of things that we'll look at tonight. But first, as we begin, let's go to Exodus 25, and we'll read about how God gave them instructions on building the Ark of the Covenant. Exodus 25, verses 8 through 22. I'm using the New King James Version if you're following along. Hopefully you can follow along easily. God said, "Let them make me a sanctuary that I may dwell among them, according to all that I show you, that is, the pattern of the tabernacle and the pattern of all its furnishings, just so you shall make it. And they shall make an ark of acacia wood, 2.5 cubits in length, 1.5 cubits in width, and 1.5 cubits in height. You shall overlay it with pure gold. Inside and out you shall overlay it, and shall make it on it a molding of gold all around. You shall cast 4 rings of gold for it, and put them in its 4 corners. 2 rings shall be on one side, and 2 rings on the other side. And you shall make poles of acacia wood, and overlay them with gold. You shall put the poles into the rings on the sides of the ark, that the ark may be carried by them. The poles shall be in the rings of the ark, they shall not be taken from it. And you shall put into the ark the testimony which I give you. You shall make a mercy seat of pure gold. 2.5 cubits shall be the length, and 1.5 cubits its width. And you shall make 2 cherubim of gold. Of hammered work you shall make them at the 2 ends of the mercy seat. Make 1 cherub at one end, and the other cherub at the other end. You shall make the cherubim at the 2 ends of it of one piece with the mercy seat. And the cherubim shall stretch out their wings above, covering the mercy seat with their wings. And they shall face one another. The faces of the cherubim shall be toward the mercy seat. You shall put the mercy seat on top of the ark, and in the ark you shall put the testimony that I will give you. And there I will meet with you, and I will speak with you from above the mercy seat, from between the 2 cherubim which are on the ark of the testimony, about everything which I will give you in commandment to the children of Israel." This article or this piece of furniture that was in the tabernacle was kind of like the focal point, the highlight, the most beautiful of all the parts in the tabernacle. The Glenn Jones someone I had a booklet by had said this quote, "The importance placed by Israel upon the Ark of the Covenant is astounding. The importance given to this Ark by Jehovah God was stupendous." So it was like it was something that they valued very much, and they didn't worship it, but it almost seems like they put a high regard on that. It was an amazing piece of furniture. But when you think of what God, who had designed it and had given it, and what He thought of it, was much greater than even man's ideas. This box was a symbol of God's presence, of His communion, His speaking with man. It was a place where He spoke with Moses, with the priest. It was a symbol of His power and of His deliverance. And we'll look at a few of those things. Here's some of the names that are given to this. I called this titled Ark of the Covenant. That's one of the terms. It was called the Ark of the Covenant. So it was like, when you think of a covenant is almost like a promise, a contract, a mutual agreement. This was the ark of God's promised relationship with man. It was also called the Ark of the Testimony, because in it God had His testimony, His words, His commands that were kept inside. It was called the Ark of the Lord. That word Lord is the all capital letters that we would say is Jehovah, the proper name of God. The Ark of the Lord. Sometimes it was called the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord. Emphasizing that the covenant was that which God instituted and gave to man. It was called the Ark of God, and also the Ark of Thy Strength, speaking of God's strength. Those are some of the titles given to this piece of furniture and I think each of these things are special when we think of God's testimony, His words, His commands that are encapsulated here. We think of the relationship, the covenant with man. We think of how it belonged or was linked to God Himself. Here's some scriptures that bring out a few of these names. 1 Kings 8:21 says, "I have set there a place for the ark, wherein is the covenant of the Lord, which He made with our fathers when He brought them out of the land of Egypt." When Moses came into the wilderness and brought them to the Mount Sinai, we read that when He gave His commands at Mount Sinai and the people heard and feared and trembled, God made a covenant with His people, saying, "You shall worship Me and no other, and you shall hallow My name. You shall have no other gods before Me. You shall treat your fellow man with love and respect and honor." This is a covenant God made with His people. He called them to live this way. This is the covenant of the Lord which He made with our fathers when He brought them out of the land of Egypt. Later, it says that there was some different things that were put into the ark and were stored there. Different testimonies of what God did for His people. Maybe that's partly the reason why it's called the Ark of Testimony. But in 2 Corinthians 5, when the temple was made and the ark was put into the temple, from the tabernacle into the temple, it says that at that point there was nothing in the ark save the 2 tables which Moses put therein at Horeb, when the Lord made a covenant with the children of Israel when they came out of Egypt. So at that point, the other things that were put in had been lost, or I don't know what happened to them. But there was still the tables that Moses put therein when it was there. God had said in Exodus 25, we read this, "Thou shalt put into the ark the testimony which I shall give thee." This testimony meaning almost like the words, the things that I give you, you're going to put inside here. Also we read in Exodus 25 here, "Thou shalt put the mercy seat above the ark, and in the ark thou shalt put the testimony that I give thee. And there I will meet with thee, I will commune with thee from above the mercy seat, from between the 2 cherubim, which are upon the ark of the testimony of all the things which I give thee in commandment unto the children of Israel. So God's commands, his will for man, how they should live, were in there. That was Exodus 25. We had read that earlier here. 25, and those were just 21 and 22. Verse 21 and 22. That was the importance that God placed on this box. I say box, but box sounds so plain. I want to look just a little bit at its structure, how it was built. And this here we read in Exodus 25 where it kind of gave the dimensions of it. It said that the basic box of it was made of acacia wood or of, it says acacia wood in New King James. Does someone else have what it said there in verse 10? Shittim wood, okay, is another term for it. That was a common tree of the desert, a thorny tree, very plain, and in that was a type or representation of humanity. And this common box and this whole piece of furniture, I believe, points to Christ. He came as a common human person. He came in the likeness of human flesh. The basic box was built of the acacia wood, representing his humanity. It was covered in gold, which was representative of deity, of God. So he was man, yet God. And this points to him. It wasn't just a plain flat box, like a plywood box you made there and just flat. I don't believe. Because it was made to be something beautiful, something crafted by a master craftsman. I wanted to read just who God chose to build this. In Exodus 31, verses 2 through 7, God said, "See, I have called by name Bezalel, the son of Uri, the son of Hur of the tribe of Judah. And I have filled him with the Spirit of God, in wisdom, in understanding, in knowledge, in all manner of workmanship." Now, I've built things in the shop, and I can't claim to have all these things. I wish. He was given wisdom and understanding and knowledge and all manner of workmanship, designed to do artistic work, to work in gold, in silver, in bronze, in cutting jewels, in carving wood, and to work in all manner of workmanship. And I have appointed with him Oholiab, the son of Ahisamach, of the tribe of Dan, and I have put wisdom in the hearts of all of the gifted artisans, that they may make all that I have commanded you: the tabernacle of meeting, the ark of the testimony, and the mercy seat that is on it, and all the furniture of the tabernacle. God said that I've given wisdom and creativity and just a master craftsman skill to these men to build this. So I believe that this wasn't just a plain box and it wasn't hidden because it wasn't beautiful. It was put in a special place, but it was something that was exquisite. Part of it was also a crown. Well, I just want to back up a little bit. That basic box, it says, we don't speak in cubits and 2.5 cubits. And so just kind of translating that basically into things, it would have been about 45 inches long, 27 inches deep, wide, 27 inches deep. I was just trying to think of what I could find here in the house that would kind of give you an idea of the size of what it was. Probably this cabinet here, right, that the fish tank sits on. If you would include that from the top to the floor, height and width, that would be the amount of square inches that the box. It's a little bit different dimensions. It's a little bit, would have been a little bit shorter, lower, a little bit wider. But it would have been pretty close. Actually, it would have been pretty close to the same square inches as that. So it was a good sized box. It would have taken some guys to carry this thing, especially when you think of the solid gold lid with the two beaten cherubims sitting on top. It would have been a heavy box to carry. A couple stone tablets inside. I'm just thinking, these guys walking, it would get heavy. On this box, it had a crown of solid gold. And some of the other pieces of furniture, they would have put like flowers and almonds and different things that they would have built like into the candlestick. This here, I imagine that the crown would have had some sort of design, something to beautify it, something to glorify it. When we think of a crown that a king or royalty wears, it's something that is the diadem is something that just is spectacular, breathtaking. The crown of this would have also been like that as well. The lid, the mercy seat, said it was made of pure gold. And there are times when it talks about pure gold, something that is tried. It has the reflection. Someone who's smelting down gold and boiling it down or however they do it in a furnace, they know it's pure when they can see the reflection in it. So I think of not only is this thing just like a dull color, but something that probably would have reflected light and glisten. On the top was the two cherubim with their wings outstretched over the ark, their faces inward and downward toward the mercy seat. That is the picture of it that we can have in our mind. Let's look at the contents, what God had them put in it. Hebrews 9, verses 3 and 4 says, after the second veil, that inner veil in the tabernacle which is called the holiest of all, which had the golden censer, the ark of the covenant, overlaid round about with gold, wherein was the golden pot that had manna, Aaron's rod that budded, and the tables of the covenant. First, I want to just look at those stone tables of the law written by the finger of God himself. That was pretty awesome to have something that God personally etched with his finger. A stone that he put his commandments on. The stone tables, the covenant or the testimony that he did. So thank you for reading those verses earlier, Brother Micah, of when they came before God, how they prepared themselves to hear the commandment of God when he spoke from the mountain, and how they trembled. This was his will, his commands that were given to them. Not only did God speak it, he knows the frailty of man that we forget. And he wrote it down. And Moses, he wasn't even gone 40 days up on the mountain talking with God. And they broke the first, I don't know how many different ones of them. They built a golden calf. They were worshiping other gods, giving credit to bringing them out of Egypt to these other idols. Moses came down from the mountain. God was angry with the people, and he wanted to just destroy them, and Moses pled. But Moses, when he came down seeing what they were doing, he took the 10 commandments, the stones, threw them to the base of the mountain, and they broke. That precious stones that God had wrote on were broken. And judgment was given to the people because they turned against God. But then God told Moses to hew out 2 more stones, to bring them up to the mountain. And God says that God wrote on them again the commandment that was on the first. Here's some places where he mentions where he told them to put these in. Deuteronomy 31:26, take this book of the law, put it in the side of the ark of the covenant of the Lord your God, that it may be there for a witness against thee. A witness, a reminder of what God said. So this box was kind of like almost like reminders of what God's commands were, of what he did for them. He gave unto Moses, Exodus 31:18, when he had made an end of communing with him upon Mount Sinai, 2 tables of testimony, tables of stone, written with the finger of God. And I read this one earlier. Well, no, actually it was a different verse, but I just mentioned it twice, I guess. There was, in 1 Kings 8:9, it says, there was nothing in the ark at this later time, save the 2 tables of stone, which Moses put there at Horeb, when the Lord made a covenant with the children of Israel when they came out of Egypt. So in this holy box, God had his commands, his laws, his testimonies put. Also, there was the pot of manna. Now, during their wilderness wanderings, they weren't able to harvest grain, they weren't able to have crops, they weren't able to have fields, they moved from place to place, they were in the desert, but God provided for them. He gave them bread from heaven, a daily provision that was given each day. It was something that would spoil if they didn't keep it fresh, if they didn't pick fresh each day, except for the day before the Sabbath day where they were to have a day of rest. God provided double the day before, and that did not spoil. But every other day they tried to keep it over, it spoiled. But it did not spoil that day, and that would lend to this fact that God wanted a testimony or a reminder them of his provision for them in the wilderness of this daily food, this manna, this angel's food. And God said, put a pot of this manna in the ark of testimony as well. And it is believed that this that was put in there did not spoil as well. Would have kept for generations. Not that they walked back there to see it, but I guess God could have had his priest pull it out and show it. At some point, this pot of manna was lost. But it was a testimony of God's provision, his care for his people, his daily bread that he gave them. Also included in this was Aaron's rod. And I believe this is the same rod that was used by Moses and Aaron as they came to Pharaoh, as they left Egypt, as they came to a rock in the wilderness. Moses struck the rock and water came out. He threw down the rod and it turned into a serpent before Pharaoh. And he used it to strike the rivers and turn them to blood. He used it for the plagues of Egypt. They came to the Red Sea. He held out his rod over the sea and the water divided and they went across. He held it out again and it came together and covered the Egyptian army. It was a rod was almost a symbol of God's power, his authority in the hands of Moses and Aaron. There came a time within the camp that the people in Numbers 17, some of the other priests, some of the other people began to think, well, Aaron and Moses think they're kind of special to God. We're just as special. We're God's chosen people. We would like to have a little more authority, a greater place in the nation. And God judged the rebellion that was stirred up in that. And following that, God said, I want to give a picture to you, or I want to show you a demonstration of who I have chosen. And those that I have chosen will be the ones who will stand before me and serve me in the tabernacle, the temple. And so God had a chief person from each of the 12 tribes who came and brought their rod. Aaron brought his rod called the rod of God, and he brought his rod, and each of the other 11 of the 12 tribes brought a rod. And they took that and they put it in this holy place, the most holy place, overnight, or they put it in the temple overnight. A dry walking stick, a dry rod. I have a bunch of them that I save when we go hiking different times. It's kind of fun having a hiking stick, and you polish it up and it's all nice, and you can smack bushes with it and you can use it to stabilize yourself, but it's dead. It's been disconnected from the root source for a long time. God put these 12 rods with their names on it before the Lord. The next morning they came, and Aaron's rod says it budded, bloomed, and bore almonds. Whoa, in one night. And it was God was saying, this is my declaration of the one I've chosen to stand for me in this role. And God had them put this rod also in the Ark of the Covenant as a as a thing of testimony that Aaron and his followers were the ones that were chosen here. I want to think a little bit of so we looked at the contents. I want to look at its position or its place. that it had. I had already kind of mentioned it, I guess, but it was set into the most holy place behind the veil. It was covered from human eyes, unseen by all, untouched. The only one who ever was able to see it was the high priest, who went in once a year with a special sacrifice. But this was a mobile tabernacle that they moved from place to place. When the pillar of fire and pillar of cloud which rested on the tabernacle would lift up, they knew time to move camp. They would have to break everything down. The tabernacle was meant to be folded and put away. Numbers 4, verses 5 and 6, I won't read that at this time, but it mentions that when they were going to move, they would go in, typically the high priest or someone would go in, take that veil that divided the holy place from the most holy place, take the veil, and they would cover the Ark of the Covenant. Then over that, they put a covering of badger skins. That typically something thought as more of waterproofing, something to keep it from the weather. But over that was a blue covering. And I'm not sure exactly what all that means. Some think, well, something celestial, something heavenly. I'm not sure if that's what the blue meant, but it was a blue that stood out and was beautiful. But it covered the ark, but they knew what was there as it was carried in their travels. Its position, it was the place of God's presence in the tabernacle, and as they moved, it also was a representation of God's presence going ahead of them as they traveled. Numbers 10, verse 35, it came to pass when the ark set forward that Moses said, "Rise up, Lord, and let thine enemies be scattered, and let them that hate thee flee before thee." And when it rested, he said, "Return, O Lord, unto the many thousands of Israel." So it was a representation of God's presence, of God's place that went before the people, led them, and caused them to rest. There was prescribed handling of the ark. It was carried on 2 poles. And why was this? It was a certain thing. The box itself was not to be touched, but it was to be lifted up on high. I get this picture. I don't know if you've ever seen a sports team, and it's some intense game, and someone does the winning home run, and they come in, and everyone grabs this guy and just lifts him up on their shoulders or throws him in the air. They put him up on high. It's like they honor this person, that this person is somehow very special. And so, indeed, this Ark of the Covenant, lifted to the shoulders of the priests, was lifted up and honored in position before all the people. It was celebrated and honored. As it sat in the tabernacle, it was the place of atonement. It was a place where that sacrifice for sin was made. It was a place of meeting, communing, where God met with Moses, the priest, spoke his words to them, and commanded them. It was a place of the presence of God. That was the position that it held. I think of the glory and power of the Ark of the Covenant. The pillar of cloud that filled the tabernacle was the glory of God's presence. Numbers 9:15 through 17 says, "On the day that the tabernacle was reared up, the cloud that had led them covered the tabernacle, namely the tent of the testimony." So the part that it was over the most holy place, the tent of testimony. "And at evening there was upon the tabernacle, as it were, the appearance of fire until the morning. So it was always. The cloud covered it by day, and the appearance of fire by night. And when the cloud was taken up from the tabernacle, then after that the children of Israel journeyed. In the place where the cloud abode, there the children of Israel pitched their tents." Leviticus 16, verse 2, speaking about the glory and the power that was there in this special ark. "The Lord said unto Moses, Speak unto Aaron thy brother, that he come not at all times," or you could say at any time, "into the holy place within the veil, before the mercy seat which is upon the ark, that he die not. Even the high priest could die. It says, for I will appear in the cloud upon the mercy seat. I wanted to give just some little snapshots of the ark, different times in the history of Israel here as they came into the land of Canaan and became a kingdom established in Israel there. First of all, we see the ark that went before them in their wilderness wanderings. But then, as they came to the Jordan River, after Moses died, and Joshua led them across the Jordan River, we can see the picture. Maybe I'll read that. Joshua chapter 3. Joshua chapter 3, verse 11. Behold, the ark of the covenant of the Lord of all the earth is crossing over before you into the Jordan. We're familiar with the story. The priest went before. The people weren't supposed to travel too close, like 1,000 feet back or something, I can't remember. But they were a little ways behind. But the ark of the covenant went before. And they came to this overflowing Jordan that was flood stage, and they just walked right up to it in faith. And as soon as their soles of their feet touched the water stopped, stood up in a heap, backed all the way up the river towards another city. But the rest of it flowed down, and they all walked across dry land. When they were done, they brought some stones out of the riverbed, set them up as a testimony of what God did for them. And then the priests came out, and as soon as their feet come up out of the river, the water comes down again. There we see God's leading, and I don't really know how it was set up. I don't think the city of Jericho overlooked the spot that they crossed, probably, but I'm sure there was spies or people who were watching to see what these people were going to do, and I can just watch their mouth drop open. And whoa, what's in this blue covering that these people are carrying? It's like the water splits and they walk across and they run back to their city telling them, whoa, something fearful is happening. We see that when they crossed the Jordan, there was just a miraculous sign that God gave. Then when they came to the conquering of Jericho, that God, they didn't often do this in battles, but here around Jericho, the priests carried the Ark of the Covenant with 7 priests with ram's horns walking ahead. They circle the city one time each day for 6 days. And the 7th day, they circle it 7 times and then blow the trumpets, and the walls all fell flat. And it was like, wow, what is this box? What is under this covering? There's power there. But it was because of what it represented and the glory of God and what God did and what He had hallowed. But in itself, it wasn't a magic charm. For we find that in the days of Eli, that there was a battle with the Philistines, and his 2 sons thought, hey, let's take the ark and God will give us victory. So they grab the ark out of the tent, the tabernacle, and they run out to battle. And God allowed the ark to be captured by the Philistines. And when that happened, one of Eli's daughter-in-laws was ready to give birth, and she actually gave birth to a son, and she called the son Ichabod. She said, because the glory of the Lord has departed from Israel. It's like we've lost the glory of God. But it wasn't just a magic thing. It didn't give them automatic power because they were walking in sin and disobedience, and it did not help them in that way. However, there was still something that God said was special about that ark, because the Philistines went, and everywhere they went and put it in their city, plagues broke out. They put it in their temple Dagon, and they thought, oh, we'll set it up right next to our idol Dagon. Next morning they come, and Dagon's flat on his face before the ark. And they set him back up. Next morning he comes in, he's flat on his face again, except his head's off, his hands are off. And they're sitting on the threshold before the ark of the Lord. And I just want to read that. I just mentioned that Dagon was humiliated there, but in 1 Samuel 5, we'll see what the Philistines said about that. I think it's verse 7. When the men of Ashdod saw how it was, they said, "The ark of the God of Israel must not remain with us, for his hand is harsh toward us and Dagon our God." They said, "We got to get rid of him." So they did something. They didn't know the commands of God. They put it on an ox cart and kind of gave a certain sign, if this was God's will or not. And sure enough, the ox just walked back to Israel. And these were like milk cows with calves. And they left their calves behind and just took it back to Israel. And they were just amazed at what had happened. So it came back to Israel. And then David, when he was king, he said, "You know what? It's been dwelling over here for quite some time. We want to bring it back to where the tabernacle is. We want to set it up in Jerusalem. We want to bring the ark back. It deserves to be here where God is worshipped." And so I think without thinking through it, he copied the same form that the Philistines had used to transport the ark. But God had told his people how to carry it on the poles. But they put it on an ox cart, not the prescribed way. And as they did that, the oxen were going through a rough area and it stumbled. And one of the priests who was going with it reaches out and grabs hold of the ark to steady it. And he was struck dead because he should have known better. He was God's people, knowing the commands and laws. But David feared God that day when he's like, "Whoa, I got to be very careful with this." So he said, we're just letting it sit for a while. And it went aside, was put into the home of, who was it? I can't remember. Starts with an O. Was it Obed-Edom? It was put in his home, and while it was in his home was blessed and gave David courage, and they ended up bringing it back to Jerusalem the proper way, the prescribed way that God did. He brought it back. So that was some of the glory and the power in those snapshots that we see. I want to look at the mercy seat, the lid on the Ark of the Covenant. What was it made out of? What was the inside? What was the core of the lid made out of?
Pure gold.
Good. I was going to see if I could trick anyone to say the acacia wood. That was the box itself. That was made out of wood, but the lid was pure gold. And someone mentioned that the lid, the mercy seat, is all the provision of God. It's nothing human that we can bring to God. It is God that provides all the mercy as we come to Him. It is called the mercy seat. It is the place where the blood of atonement was applied once a year. Leviticus 16, verses 13 to 15, talks about the Day of Atonement. The Day of Atonement, they had chose 2 goats. One was chosen to have sins put on it and sent out into the wilderness. The other one was sacrificed and the blood taken and put on the goat that was sent out. Also, some of the blood of it was taken into the holy place and sprinkled on the mercy seat, representing the covering of the people's sins. Also, before that happened, a bullock was offered for Aaron, or for the high priest, and he took that blood in for himself to put on the mercy seat. Then he took care of the goat, took its blood in. This was verses 13 through 15. And he shall put incense on the fire before the Lord, that the cloud of incense may cover the mercy seat that is on the testimony, lest he die. So just outside that veil was the incense altar. He put coals in there and incense, that this cloud of incense came over, covered the mercy seat. And then It says, he shall take some of the blood of the bull and sprinkle it with his finger on the mercy seat on the east side. Before the mercy seat he shall sprinkle some of the blood with his finger 7 times. Then he shall kill the goat of the sin offering, which is for the people, and bring its blood inside the veil, to do with that blood as he did with the blood of the bull, and sprinkle it on the mercy seat and before the mercy seat. So shall he make atonement for the holy place, etc. The mercy seat. That word is closely related to the word that we use in the New Testament, propitiation, which is an atonement, showing the reconciliation of God and man coming together. An expiation, that of the removal of sin and its consequences. 1 John 2:2. We're familiar with that. I want to just read where it mentions propitiation in a couple places here, and we recognize that this is a similar word or a similar thought as the mercy seat. 1 John 2, verse 2. He himself is the propitiation for our sins, the expiation, the removal of our sins, the atonement of our sins, and not for ours only, but also for the sins of the whole world. Romans 3:25. Pages stick. So Jesus Christ, whom God set forth as a propitiation by his blood through faith to demonstrate his righteousness, because in his forbearance God had passed over the sins that were previously committed.